Hi, I'm Partha Patel. Today, I'll walk you through some of the features of our integration platform, Built.io Flow. Built.io Flow is a real-time event-based integration engine. This means when something happens in another system, it'll kick off a workflow. This first event is a trigger action. In this case, this workflow is an inbound marketing workflow. There's a new message on your website. From there, we want to add the lead into Salesforce, add them into our sales tool, Outreach, as well as add them to Marketo. The first part of this is the trigger, the new message. In this case, we're getting a new message from Intercom, but the trigger could be from any number of services. As you can see here, any of these services are set up the same way. Say you want to use something like Jira as your trigger. You simply click on it, create a new trigger, authorize it using the preferred method, typically OAuth, and then from there you choose the trigger action. So as you can see, there's a couple different options here. You choose whichever one fits your integration requirements. And then you can either hit save here or you can get more granular with the data. So you may have seen this list on the right hand side populate. You can add filters based on any of these fields, which are defined by the API, and add the filters right here. From there, what do you do with that data? That's where this right hand list comes into play. So we have about 200 different services ranging, your normal enterprise applications, whether it's Salesforce, Marketo, Cisco products, that kind of stuff, and they all work the same way. So say in this workflow, I wanted to add in a little extra automation. Say I wanted to send a message on HipChat, for example. I come into here, drag it onto the canvas, connect up some data to it, pass its output somewhere else, and then from there, all I have to do is come into here and fill out a form. So once again, you choose your authorization through whatever the preferred method is, and then from there, it's just filling out a form. So you can either dynamically pull the name in or statically put it in. Let me jump over to one that's already pre-configured, like Salesforce. What you'll see here is all the outputs from the trigger, as well as any previous actions. You can use these fields anywhere in these applications now. So you can either dynamically pull stuff in from the trigger, such as a user email address, or you can leave it static. And tools like Salesforce have many fields, so you can even access custom fields. So really all the power of the API is still exposed to you without, having to go through the complex learning process of learning each API call. Now there's a couple other things I wanted to point out to you. You may have noticed some things on the canvas that aren't necessarily API calls, like an error handler, a string split, or some of these memory stores. These are what we call our developer tools. These are things that you need to have to be able to build an integration, an enterprise integration. So the first thing I wanted to point out was the ability for you to import APIs. So we understand that we don't have every API out there. There's something like 40,000 different APIs out there. So we understand we may not have every single one. If you're working with an API that's defined by Swagger or the Open API or RAML, it's super simple to import it. All you do is come into here, drag the action onto the canvas, double click, drop in your Swagger file, and then hit fetch. Now what this is going to do is import that entire structure and populate all the different API requests. So now you can see I have quite a few API requests from here. So say I choose one. What you'll get once again is that form-based UI, so it's super simple to build out these connections without having to learn an entire API. In addition to that, we have a couple other tools so you can access those APIs we may not have, or private endpoints. I'm sure you're familiar with your typical HTTP requests, so we have that obviously built in the product, as well as a new thing we released a couple months ago, which was our connector builder. This is a CLI-based tool that allows you to create your own connector. One, it has things like OAuth built into it, as well as the ability for you to import and export this action to any number of users. So say you want to deploy this to your organization, you can do that. You can even publish it to our public library after going through a little bit of QA process with us. Jumping back into the developer tools, there's a couple other things I just wanted to point out. The first being the stuff under the developer tools tab. So this includes all the things like the error handler, the mapper. The mapper allows you to connect multiple outputs from multiple different API calls into one cohesive structure. So it's very easy to import and export data like that. We also have the Node.js block, which allows you to drop in any kind of custom node code you may have. So any complex business logic, any pre-existing code you have built out in Node, you can drop it in here and it works with all other actions. We also have the ability for you to return data on a webhook. So say you change this trigger action to a webhook, you can now return that data on a webhook. So you can create, quote unquote a meta API. So you can have a bunch of different things happening and then send that information back over a webhook. We also have the switch, which is the ability for you to apply conditional logic and then have multiple different outcomes. And we also have the enterprise connector, which is one part of a two-piece system that allows you to connect to on-prem databases or systems behind a firewall. This allows you to then, pull that data out of your systems and connect it to any number of cloud services. So let me just pull in Salesforce, for example, and say I want to get the accounts. You can see once again it builds that nice form-based UI, so it's dead simple to build out these integrations. Now, jumping into some more of that testing kind of environment, let me just delete this action. And what I'll do is I'll just run this. Now, this will error out because it doesn't have the proper input, but it'll allow me to show you some of the additional features of our platform. The first being this visual debugging. So you can see as each API call is made, you can see where the data is passing, and you can see that there's an error. Now, this is a pretty vague error here, but what you can do is you can see every single API call that's been made, or every single action that's been executed, and as well as how long it's taken. So this is a very easy, high-level overview of what's happened in your workflow. Now you can also punch in. So say I want to see what happened with this Salesforce action. I can see exactly what the input was, as well as what the output was. So this makes it simple to, debug your workflows and see what's happening. Now jumping into some more of the enterprise or organization level features. What I'll do is I'll click into my organization. Now this is a way for you to control and manage all of your users in one account. So you can see here I have a bunch of different projects set up. Basically, a project is a folder that includes all of your workflows as well as the authorizations for those specific workflows. Now some of the features of the organization is that you can set up your own roles. So this means you can allow people to access either all the projects, or we can dive into each specific project so you can, very easily control who has access to what. Your user control, so you can invite users here or delete users here, as well as the ability to have single sign-on. In addition to the user controls, you also have things like audit logs. So this allows you to see every single thing that's happened in your entire organization for any number of dates. You also have the ability to filter down to specific users, modules, or actions. You also have activity logs, which are more of the workflow side of things. So you can see your logs here. You can see what executed successfully. So you can come into here and view your logs, as well as export the logs here. And lastly, we have the metrics. So this is a very high level overview of what your account's been doing. So you can see how many credits you've used out of your monthly allocation, as well as for various date ranges.